welcome to the Just podcast with Tim Buxton, proudly recorded on Yugambeh country, the land of the Kombumerri saltwater people of the Gold Coast, Australia. Through courageous conversations with leaders and pioneers across diverse fields, we'll unpack the important, often complex topics that are shaping our world today and explore what it takes to create lasting, positive change in our communities. Each episode you'll be inspired by entrepreneurs, educators, artists, humanitarians, and unsung everyday heroes doing the extraordinary work it takes to build a just world. A world filled with hope, belonging, and boundless possibilities. So, without further ado, let's dive into another courageous conversation, inspiring change. Hey friends, welcome back to the Just podcast, where we hold space for courageous conversations that have the power to shape a better future. And today's guest is Rod Hopping, the founder and CEO of Heritage Films, recording just before their own rebrand, just like we've had here on the podcast. Again, this episode recorded a while back feels very timeless. It's raw, it's honest, and a reflection on what it means to evolve, to never give up, and to believe in the power of good, inspirational storytelling each step of the way. And just like the films that Rod brings to life, this one is full of heart, hope, and meaning. So without further ado, let's get into it. So how do movies change people, Rod?
Well, it changed me. I mean, I reckon I'm probably chatting to you because of the movie Braveheart. So for all the old farts out there like me, I think that was 1995. So I'm a 25-year-old. I'm just in that stage, you know what the 20s are like, right? And this thing just grabbed hold of me. And I think I've always been passionate from that moment about freedom. And if you're in my office now, you'd see a replica sword, William Wallace replica sword up on the wall.
No way.
They're pretty big, tall things, 6 foot something. And so I think that it put like a seed in me that it grew over time, and I didn't want it to. I didn't really understand what was going on. I mean, I'm a person who was raised and went to church most Sundays, and it used to bother me that I would get more out of watching movies than going to church when it came to feeling some sense of my spirit engaging with life and maybe what was life all about and purpose. So that's where it all started.
Yeah. So William Wallace mooning the opposite side with his bare Scottish butt to the English and the heroics. I guess that you know, I've got some friends that have written books about this story brand concept. You're writing the age-old nature of what does it take to tell a story. And it requires a hero, it requires a villain, it requires a guide, it requires a philosophical problem that the hero has to overcome, as well as maybe a physical problem that they've got to overcome. And it's got all these components, because that's kind of like we get to choose in life, I guess, from time to time, any number of those characters that we might need to play, right, in order to, I guess, fulfill our purpose, our mission on this world. And we can see that played out in movies. We see it in books and stories, and businesses grabbed a hold of that, right? And you see that in the marketing world and how they use the power of story, the power of that age-old ability to craft a plot line. And I think when we watch a movie, that's kind of pretty much what movies do, don't they? They one way or another, they relate to us in so many different ways. What about Braveheart? You said freedom. What about Braveheart? What else about Braveheart, to stick on that, was so impacting for you then?
Yeah, I think it was the sense of a small group, a small band of people, in that instance, just this band of Scottish farmers, if you like. The odds were stacked against them. Do you know, I was so into it. The reason I love watching movies is I don't read many books, which is not good, but I was so into Braveheart that I went to the library and got these books on William Wallace. I wanted to find out what was true, and obviously there's Hollywood there, but the history books kind of counter moment where Wallace and 9 of his band were confronted by 100 Englishmen and they won. I mean, get your head around that. So the movie probably didn't even really kind of cover those moments or sum up those moments. That sheer passion to be 10-1 and to still have a victory. There's something extraordinary about that. And I think the limitation of resources, they weren't that organised regimental group, but there was the passion. It was the tyranny that they were being opposed by, the tyranny of evil, if you like, that was holding them back from being everything they were meant to be as Scottish people. And I think that sheer fight against something that is just blatantly wrong, and that sense that it gives you an edge over those that are oppressing, regardless of how big they are. Interestingly, in fast forward 30-something years for me, and I'm passionate about issues to do with human trafficking and child trafficking, and have been involved in films about that. And there's another picture there of the tyranny of evil, and it's considered this stuff's run by cartels. You're like, who are we to stand up against cartels? You know what I mean? But isn't it that same spirit too that is possible? Like, there may only be a small band of us, but we're not going to give up the fight. And so weirdly, I was always a big Mel Gibson fan. I mean, again, growing up in the 80s, Lethal Weapon, it was just like, I was mad about him as an actor. And then I started to love the movies that he directed. He moved into that space, and he's directed some he's a very good filmmaker. And then I'm in a different career. I'm in a different space in the midst of all of this, but still niggling with this seed in me about movies. And I couldn't let go of it, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then he announced The Passion. He was going to make The Passion.
Yes, I remember that.
And so this is profound. The way, if he does this well, because he's such an excellent filmmaker, we're in for a treat here. And it's going to, I think, introduce us to that moment in history in a way we've never, ever been introduced before. And long story short, that movie was kind of like a mother eagle that kicked me out of the nest. And not long after, or as it was coming out, I started a movie distribution business. I literally left the only industry I'd ever known. I've never been to uni. I don't have any qualifications. And I started in a business space, because that's all I've ever known, in the film industry. But I had no idea how the business of film worked. And that was, we're in our 20th year now. And I literally our latest project that we just finished was in partnership with Mel Gibson's company. It was and his partner, who I got to meet through 20 years ago, that's another story for another day, just because I knocked on their door with my passion and enthusiasm, and I'd never met anybody in the film industry. And I got invited to this guy's house, and he was the executive producer of Braveheart, and I got to hang with him. So 20 years later, he's like, we're reconnected, and we've just had a great time working together again.
So 20 years ago, you started this movie publishing distribution company that really focuses on films that have transformative, positive stories that are geared towards, maybe the way I would put it, creating a beautiful and good world, right? That inspire us and motivate us towards that, which is, we know deep down to be admirable, good, and you're 20 years on, you're kicking along. What you touched on when you were talking about the whole tapping into the few to oppose kind of the masses, it is that perennial storyline for those that are fighting the just fight, right? Because in essence, it is so much easier to think about, well, what's going to sell, what's going to entertain, what is guaranteed to just kind of appease the quote unquote, masses, right? And that seems like the more safe route to go. But to decide that you're going to do something that you love and you tap into this industry that has impacted you and changed you, and you're like, I may as well make a career out of this, and to focus on that, which is, it might not be sexy, but it is downright transformative. What does it take? I mean, you can start with high and lofty goals and ambitions and drives and motivation. What does it take 20 years on to still be plugging away in that? And again, you see the highs and lows. You've just partnered again with Braveheart's executive producer. But then to plug away in an industry that always seems to you always seem to be the underdog, if that makes sense. What's it take? What's it been like for these last 20 years since you've started?
Yeah, I can clearly see, Tim, how we shouldn't be here. Most 20-year-old businesses or operations are pretty entrenched, pretty solid, pretty cashed up. They just are. To survive 20 years, you've really got got a deep anchor on the world of your business. And yet we've had to start 2 or 3 times over, and just simply because of technology, and also the thing that made us all start over a bit, the whole COVID thing. But I think I've got my profile pic on some of my socials and some of my internal work kind of platforms and the like is not a picture, but it's just 3 words: never give up. And I put that there not for anyone else. I put that there for me because, for instance, my team chat platform where we do all of our kind of work, I need to see that when I'm come to work, because life doesn't go to plan. Things happen that you don't want to happen, but and we need to take care of ourselves and those around us. But we can't take care of those around us if we're not taking care of ourselves as well. And so I'm a bit of a persistent kind of a person. I have a sales background. I used to sell typewriter ribbons to people who would type lots and reams of paper, and to just something about that gritty sales background where you get nine no's in a row. You're like thinking that there's a yes coming up is right. It takes a certain persistence, I guess. And sometimes for me, it was just the desperation of needing a wage that week, right? And so, yeah, I think, and that's just another lesson I think I learned from Braveheart as well. If you watch that movie or you study William Wallace's life, there wasn't one particular moment where everything changed. They had to go and take back everything that had been taken in little town. And I think you develop muscle as well, and that helps with never giving up. And life is I believe, I'm a believer that there's a backpack on all of us, right? And there's stuff in the backpack that is there when we need it. And it's a part of, I think, provision and goodness. But I also think the backpack's got experience that gets put into it as well.
Absolutely. As you were sharing, and even as you referred back to William Wallace's kind of the underlying story of this small group of people, I think of this story in the Old Testament, the Bible, right? There's a story of this warrior named Gideon, and I believe he has like 3 men that he ends up defeating a whole army with. And I'm the kind of person that when I read the Bible now, I don't actually look at it to kind of analyze the facts of it and the this and the that. I just think, what is the real story, or the moral to the story that is being told? Because I'm pretty sure, in Near East ancient storytelling, again, this idea of story and movies, this would have been the movie that the elder of the community would have sat down around a fire and told the children. It would have been these masterful storytellers telling this incredible story of these, this band of warriors going out, and Gideon, being told basically to dwindle down his mighty army force to a group of a few men who drink like horses out of the water, instead of lapping the water into their hand. And I may have got that backwards, I don't know. But the whole concept of this idea of, for me, when I read that story about God, it's not about God can do these crazy miracles all the time. It's about, well, if you want to change the world, you're better off doing it with a few committed people that are all in to what you're doing than masses and masses of people that are half-hearted. That to me is like what it means to be in this fight to create a world that, Rod, you and I will want to leave our children one day and be able to say and hold our heads high. For the time that we were on this earth, we left it. We did everything we could to leave it in as best as we could, to hand that torch off and say, you know what, it's a safer world. It's a world that is not turning in on itself. And we're seeing even, the broader narrative of governments and these powers that be today, it seems to be an unhinged world right now, to be honest. However, like you kind of alluded to there, if you just focus on the negatives, if you focus on the no's, you'd give up. But if you can just hey, you know what? Even if there's just a few of us around that have still got enough hope to believe that one moment, one thing can just change everything, then I'm all in. And so I guess relating that story to, as you were sharing, to the kind of the reason why you and I are even on this podcast, I think, is because we're individuals that love to inspire people, want to draw people into something bigger than themselves and to help them believe that, if story about what someone else has done can inspire you, then why not do what's in front of you? Start a business, that continues that mission to inspire people. Why not start a nonprofit? Why not just start a fun run, for goodness sake? Just start something. Don't talk about it. And I know this podcast is about conversations and talking, but it's about talking about stuff we're doing, about stuff that's happening, and so how does that kind of sit with you? Like where would you say, for people that engage your mission or engage your work, or even your staff and your team that are a part of you, what is it that you hope to see in the people that you work with and that are a part of watching the films and sharing the films with others?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think one of the reasons I'm so drawn to sharing stories is I'm convinced that there's something for all of us to engage with and do that brings us joy, that we're wired for, and that we can't stop thinking. Sometimes I just say to people, what do you love? Like, start there. What do you love? And then the next question sometimes is what do you hate? Like, if I love freedom and I hate injustice, then you're wired a certain way. If I love working out and I hate obesity, maybe do you know what I mean? Like, maybe you're wired to help people. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think in sharing stories, typically for me, some of the greatest stories are just really the ordinary journey. It's messy, but you alluded to it before. It's that kind of, someone helps us. They're kind of like the Gandalf, if you like. And they help us towards a goal. And
Yes.
but we're the hero of the story, right? And so when we are looking for movies, often we do a lot of true stories, because I think it doesn't have to be a true story to. You can get completely and utterly enamored about life watching a Pixar movie because they're such great stories, right? So it can be, but we tend to find a lot of true stories. We do documentaries at times, but that's a lane for us that tends to wander into social justice. We do a lot of social justice campaigns across our 20 years. We've done campaigns with organisations quite simply because we've got a movie and it helps talk about an issue. We've done campaigns on mental health and suicide. We've done a number on refugees, poverty, AIDS, trafficking, things like that. But back to kind of the, I'm such a believer that all of us have a job to do, and the job will bring us joy and fulfillment. But it will also be bloody scary to work out where to start. But sometimes, and this was my experience, I've probably niggled around doing something for 5 to 6 years. Sometimes it's really scary as well, and you've got to leave a known space, a known land, and start to wander with your backpack on into unknown territory. And that's just scary because we're creatures of comfort, right? We're human beings. But I've got a sort of saying that I live by in life, and I need to keep coming back to it a lot because it's been a driver for me. And the saying is that most of us are like the rest of us. And I think what I'm trying to do in my heart when I say that is I think human nature, I often feel that alone. If I go on socials, I often feel like everyone else is having a much nicer time than I am. People have better holidays than me, drive better cars. If I go to a social setting, if I'm invited to a party, nobody really cares if I'm there. And if I walk in the room, who am I going to talk? Like, all of these insecurities that I carry around, I wonder if you carry them at times, and I wonder if most of us are like the rest of us. And therefore, if we get to that point where, imagine if we were both nervous about going to a party, but you and I met outside the party, and I said, Tim, I'm really nervous, and you went, me too. We'd go in with greater courage, right? Because I've got a friend who's also nervous, and at least there's someone to talk to. So I think with what we do with the stories is we want to try and grab people and say, you are not alone in thinking you don't have the resource, you don't have the experience, you don't have this, you don't have that. And that might be stopping you, but most of us are like that. Most of us. All the great stuff. Apple Computers was started in a garage with 2 geeks. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
all of those things started somewhere, somehow, and we've all got something in us, I reckon. And I think it's to do with the betterment of humanity, the hope and meaning for the person next to you or across a continent from you, however you feel called to it. But in bringing that betterment to humanity, it betters us, it makes us feel fulfilled, and it gives us great joy. I've had the joy of enjoying getting out of bed most days for the last 20 years in the work I do. That's pretty cool, hey?
Yes, absolutely. We hear it all the time, if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life. But I don't know where to go. I can go, when I listen, I can go in a million directions. On that note, this is fundamental, and you said it about work, this idea of we've got something to put our hands, so a gift, a talent, an intrinsic desires, things that we need to leave our mark on this planet with. We all get to, as people say, get to write a line in the great play of existence, and to kind of abdicate that and to not fully put down what we really want to say and would love to put down is a tragedy, right? And it's a tragedy, I think, as you said, when we're constantly comparing ourselves with other people, like they're having a better time, there must be this, but we really don't know. We know that with social media, it's quite often just a front, right? And to be able to kind of back ourselves in this and to be like, you know what, I'm just going to put everything in on me and trust that, if I just give myself, that shot, and that doesn't mean that we're not going to need the people along the way to help us. But that first step does, I think, need to come from that confidence, that belief that, you know what, you deserve to back yourself. You are intrinsically loved. You are intrinsically, have something unique to bring that no one else can bring. So you damn right better, at some point, take that. But, I think when people talk about, there's the new age of work is like 4 days to whatever a week instead of 5. I sometimes think we just undersell the value of what actually work is. Like, work isn't quite often this thing we just have to get through to and then enjoy life. It's like, what if the key to being a human, the key to our existence is actually to be as creative with what is in our hands? And it's going to be hard, but isn't that what fulfillment comes when you actually put in effort and you actually work hard? Like, you don't really usually feel fulfilled with things that just come easy. It's usually, it takes that ability to really go for it. And I think there's just so many of these lies out there that seem to be driving narratives and stories that are just robbing, I think, us of, like you were saying, it doesn't even have to be this, like, you don't have to like do something that's just, so selflessly, helping others. It could be what it is, what you love. It is what you're passionate about. It is what deep down gives you great joy as well. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's often about too, what have you got in your hand as well. Like when I started this, I didn't have any knowledge of the film industry, but I had 14 or so years of business administration, marketing,
Wow.
distribution in another industry. So what have you got in your hand? You've got skills, there's always something that you've got, right? And again, it's easy to think, because that thing often that we're feeling the call towards is typically something you haven't done before, or an area that you're passionate about but you don't have experience, or maybe you've even failed before. Failure is a terrible thing too. But I think I also am a big believer too, if you're not really sure of what that thing is, go find someone who is and just hang with them, serve them, work with them. Just learn from them, just tag along, and you'll catch whatever they've got. But there comes a point in life, I think, where the fear of doing that thing becomes less than the fear of living in the world of wondering, what if I had have done that? Because that's a big fear. And when you cross that bridge and you go, well, I'm not going to live with regret. I'm not going to have the fear of wondering whether this thing would have worked or not. And yeah, it's a very different world today. You mentioned it before. I'm watching out there's this whole thing called the hustle or the gig economy, which never ever existed before. And there's so many ways to do things these days. Back in kind of the old days when I was in my teens and certainly 20s, you'd have to rock up and clock in at the same location to work and do your hours there. And everything has changed. Everything has changed. You can almost be anywhere to work these days and almost try anything. And there's no excuse really to not even, because sometimes the hustle, you've got to do some things just to pay the bills right while you're doing these other things that might represent that passion, that energy. So there's a lot of opportunity out there these days that I think that our digital world and our digital kind of economy as well brings us opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the people that had to really break out of the mold were really breaking out of some really strict kind of institutional molds. And they probably had to take much more risks to start a business and to do something than today. Really, to be quite honest. I mean, there's a lot more safety nets in place. There's a lot more, there's a lot more of acceptance of different ways of doing things than there ever was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What I maybe have mentioned it a few times, but I actually have a bit of a side hustle that's helping me kind of get my business off the ground. So I've launched a new social impact business called Just Travel, taking people on immersive cultural experiences now to the Middle East to give them that real transformative experience in a land that is just so rich in culture, in world religions, and really it's like the ground for which, when we're looking at solving some of the most greatest problems and challenges facing our world today, that's the cold face of that. And there's some phenomenal organizations doing amazing things that, I take people to have, a visit with and learn from. And just one of those ways in which I want to open people's minds up. Just the way movies change people, I feel like travel changes people, especially done well and done in a way that's, you're the student, you're not the consumer. But when you really go as in that light, it's just the most enriching thing ever. And so, however, to do that, I'm driving Uber like 3-4 days a week, through the night on most weekends. And so it's, again, what have you got in your hand? Well, we had a people mover car that I could use that can bring in what's needed. The crazy thing is I have the most phenomenal conversations with people, and I learn so much. It's like I am in like my element, as you can imagine, just chatting with people, learning from people, like just taking a genuine interest in the people that come into my car. And you'd be surprised how many people at the party they were at, no one really cared about how they're doing and what's going on in their life and what they have to give. They're too busy trying to impress or trying to be somebody. But in the Uber car, someone shows a genuine interest, and then suddenly they're just a sitting duck for like exploring what's possible with their life. It's phenomenal.
You should maybe you should start a podcast in your car as well. But you remind me of one of my favourite movies ever, Schindler's List. If you remember it, for those that have seen it, Oscar Schindler's successful, he's wealthy, the war has kind of been good to him. And all of a sudden, he starts caring about the Jews, right? And about people. And what you just put your finger on is, I'm at a party, nobody really cares about me. When we start to care about the person that's next to me, it changes our life, right? And he went from, I'm doing pretty good out of the water at the end, like that last scene, he's holding his ring up and he drops it and says, I could have sold this and it would have saved another 1,000 lives. Like that's the transformation. But it started with him actually like realizing that the precious souls who the world was discarding at the time in the war were precious people. And he came into a relationship with them. That's the other thing. He started caring about his bookkeeper because his bookkeeper was Jewish. And it's all about relationship. I think the key, and look, I have this really weird, bizarre thought that I can connect with you through a film, through a story. Again, if you can find common ground with somebody, and I bet you do this when you're driving, like if you can just find, I went to that school, like automatically you'd be like, I feel like you've known them for years, right? And it's the building block for relationships. And that's what we try and do with our movies. We try and find a connection point for you, and it's a building block for you feeling like you've discovered a friend as well.
I think you're so true. Like the things I realize is that when I get in the car, I have a couple of goals. One is how quickly can we become great friends? And if that's just like literally, I know I've got them for 20 minutes and or maybe less sometimes. But if there's I just know I can be friends with anybody, right? And so that falling short, they might not be really interested in talking whatsoever. And again, all you have to do is care about them and ask them questions. Mate, people love it.
Yeah.
They really love talking about themselves. They really love, and the good thing about being an Uber driver is I'm facing forwards. They don't ever have to look into my face. They don't have to look at me. They can just kind of share quite openly and free. They know they'll never see me again. And then the next thing is like, if I can't do that, at least I want them to leave with a smile on their face, at least feeling a little bit better about themselves than when they came in.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes, right? I'm not going to see these people again. And so what it does, it frees me to have no agenda other than, and I just want to be the best I can be at what I do, drive safe, obviously. But then just and those things, it's amazing the stories and the conversations we've had. I mean, I've had two people and ironically, the people that you look at picking up and you're like, I don't know if I want to let this person in. I always tell myself they are just a huggy bear behind whatever facade. And they always are. They're always below the surface. There's just this human crying out, right? And there's an affront, there's armor that we all carry. And, I've had in the last week 2 people say, I don't think I've ever been able to talk to anybody in my life about what I've just talked with you about.
That's bizarre, isn't it?
Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah, beautiful.
And again, it is, whilst I'm trying to hustle, quote unquote, so that to keep the other passions and dreams alive. And it's like, actually, I think it comes back to what you were saying. What have you got in your hand? What do you know you can do? What have you already got experience? It can be repurposed in so many ways. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is lost. And do you find that with a lot of the films is this idea, this concept of, like, I notice with most stories, it's like taking tragedy and turning it into triumph, right? This idea of, like, can anything be salvaged? Is there, is there worth and value in this?
Mm. Let's face it. Some of the most, if you think about some of the most engaging stories you've heard, both from people you know or movies, typically it's about the level of or depth of brokenness or mess that people have had to overcome. That's what makes it good, right? If it's just like this, if there's no risk or you're not invested in the person, and I think life is incredibly messy. And again, you have to excuse me for doing it, but it's just how I'm wired. But another movie that comes to mind,
Yeah.
Little Miss Sunshine, is about the complete and utter dysfunction of family, and it's incredibly messy. The whole thing is just incredibly messy, and it's almost at times hard to watch just how broken this family is. And all of them are carrying their own brokenness, but they're all related there. And there's something that happens in that movie. If you haven't seen it, you've got to go watch it. There's something that takes place in that movie that they stand up and they are still one unit. We are still family, and it's hilarious. First time I watched it, I was on a plane. I was bawling out loud and laughing at the same time. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but there is this, you can't avoid mess in life, right? My life has been really messy. Nothing that I had necessarily planned has gone to plan in my life. And it's been awkward at times. It's been difficult. It's been frustrating. It's sent me to the fetal position in tears. Stuff you'd never, ever want to happen, but it happens and you can't avoid it. But there often is... There's often something in the rubble, some kind of grace, some kind of hope, a droplet of joy to be found in the healing. And it's not an instant, you'll be right, mate, pat you on the back kind of thing. It's actually, and sometimes I think we want to sanitize life too much. Today's the anniversary of the death of my 29-year-old nephew. It's a terrible moment to consider, and the brokenness that's brought to our family and to my sister, his mum, and others. Just so difficult to reconcile, right? But you can't avoid these things. But what is there in each of our lives that represents the rubble and the messy stuff? Often a lot of it has to do with community as well, by being in a community of people who sincerely care for us. And it doesn't have to be your family. If anyone's kind of out there thinking, oh, if you met my family, you wouldn't want to be in community with them. I think it's about that band of people that we started talking about, that we're all different. We all, that's what I love about Braveheart. It's such an eclectic group of people, and they're funny and they're old and they're young. And I think there's something to be found in journeying with others and being careful not to be isolated as well. That is part of our stories. And, your story is important, Tim. My story is important. But the importance of our stories is how we bump into each other. So I love what you're doing in your Uber. I think that's just crazy. I really think there's got to be some great content there. Come on.
Oh, honestly, it has not evaded me the thought of somehow doing a podcast related around the Uber therapy, though I do have other ideas related to Uber that I will apply to other areas and goals and ideas. And, one of the things I really would love to just hone in on, as you kind of brought it up, would be your own story, your own personal journey, Rod. Like you mentioned that you felt like life hasn't gone to plan, and you've had to kind of pick up the pieces in your own life. I kind of equate to those times and moments to being lost, and not in a bad way always. I've got a little podcast, side podcast that I'm going to start doing a bit of a live podcast with. So for anybody that's interested in joining me for a bit of a live podcast recording, I'm going to start talking about stories from my own life where I got lost and a bit of lessons. And the common theme is get lost with me, with your host, because I believe it is in those moments when we, as you were saying before, step out of our comfort zone, or when the comfort zone gets ripped away from us. In each circumstance, what we know to be consistent, to be comfortable, to be where we've got our bearings, where everything seems to be in control, consistency, comfortability, control. When those things get taken away and we're in new environments, suddenly we're forced to be present. We're not forced to be lost. You know, this idea of being lost is this idea of being lost in the music or lost in the moment. Or the weird things is people say like they lose their temper when they actually didn't lose their temper. They found their temper, you know, and it's this idea of to be truly lost suddenly shoves you into the reality of right here, right now. You better get and face, you know, the reality of and I think it's in those moments that you actually truly find yourself.
Yeah.
And you find maybe if there's been a lie you've been living or the things that truly aren't yourself. Can you share for our listeners a little bit about maybe those moments in your life where either it's been ripped away from you, whether you've intentionally wandered off and found yourself, and what's it been like? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few of them, and it's just it's interesting to reflect on that, on being lost. That sense of feeling like the radar, the navigation system's kind of not working. I'm probably going through that sort of sense at the moment, actually. And even in the backdrop of, weirdly, this last season in my life and my wife Karen's life, we've lost three of our parents. So that includes my mum and dad. And even though they're, you know, in their mid 70s, 80s, it's still, you feel lost when they've always been around. And I've been grateful that I've always had a great relationship with my parents. And I don't take that for granted because I know that that's not always the case. But this navigation system of, my dad had dementia for 10 years. So the communication changed, but my mum, who was pretty bad from the neck down, had a really strong head, you know, and so, you know, just the desire I have to want to talk to mum about stuff. You know, she's still in my favourites, right, on my phone. That's a funny story. We text her every now and then just to say hi, but someone else has got her number now and they get a bit pissed off by that. But it's a true story.
Oh, God.
I think my latest kind of experience of that is I've had a connection to church for all of my life. I was raised with it, and then by choice, I've always had a connection, and it's been a meaningful connection. It's been a place of belonging, and I've committed myself in a form of leadership in a local church for not too far off 40 years.
Wow.
Ever since I was a teenager, you know, some level of leadership. And I don't mind responsibility, hey? I am happy to take responsibility and to take it seriously. And look, it's just the moment of time that's just happened where the movement that I was involved in decided to, I guess, put a bit of a line in the sand around sexuality and gender. And it was, if you had to ask me for all the years I was involved in that church, what do I think the stance is? I probably could have told you, right? I probably knew what it would be, but it didn't matter. It wasn't an issue. I don't tend to make it an issue one way or the other. I just was enjoying an authentic community and quite invested in the leadership of that. But the moment came, to a degree, a bit out of the blue. The line in the sand was just something that my wife and myself felt uncomfortable with, didn't subscribe to, and are on the journey away from that level of thinking and the layers of, I guess, what at times for us feels like being excluding people. And we're very big on creating an inclusive community, inclusive family, inclusive work. We're both, without going in depth, my wife does this more in a day-to-day than I do, of working with people around inclusivity and belonging in the mental health space. And me with the movies I do, right? It's huge. It's huge for us. And so this was a contradiction moment. You can't avoid contradiction in life. And that's, you know, it's messy. When people you love and care for don't agree with you, or you're living in contradiction to them, that is freaking messy. It's just hard. This one's just got a few more layers to it than us. It's not necessarily about deciding which political party we back or what football team we barrack for.
Yeah.
This one, we're not playing with monopoly money when it comes to this particular issue. We've got real cash invested, if you like, from an analogy perspective. We've got skin in the game and friendships and relationships at deep level of commitment, family, and things that have obviously been a big part of the choices we've made of late. So there's this moment for me of the radar's gone. Is I don't know if I'm breaking up with church at the moment, Tim. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? If she's been like a relationship and I'm breaking up with her, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a pretty fresh conversation. It's a here and now conversation. It's a right now kind of thought. And it's something that has been similar to experiencing the grief that I've experienced in losing my parents. At times there's been lots of emotion, very sad. to be in the space, quite angry at times about the stance, and also quite accepting the fact that I love that the people involved and have been treated with incredible love and respect. There's nothing about it relationally that has been awful, and there's got to be a gift in the rubble for Karen and I at the moment, because it is rubble. The structure for us, if you like, is collapsed, and there's got to be, I don't know what that gift is. I know that, I used to have a pretty sort of senior responsibility in that space, and I don't have it anymore. I've pulled back and resigned from any kind of official leadership now that this is kind of a more public thing. And even in that, I've got time up my sleeve that I didn't used to have, so I can sit and chat to people like Timothy Buxton about life.
Well, firstly, Rod, thanks for sharing that. And I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry just for a place that you find yourself in. I'm
Yep.
sorry in that it's not an easy place to be, and there's nothing that, I'm the kind of guy that would just want to like jump through the screen and give you a hug and be like, man, you belong, like, dude, like, yes, but it's okay to be sad, right? And I never used to allow myself to be sad or even angry and upset. I always felt like I always had to try and pull some positive spin to something. So one, it sucks. And I'm really sorry that has been your experience. And I think, if I'm honest, that I think there's a lot of people listening that might even be feeling a similar experience and at a similar place. And it might be with church, this idea of an institution, this idea of a place that is supposed to create unconditional love and acceptance, especially to the broken and especially to the hurting, and especially those to the ostracized, those that the society doesn't accept. When I look at the life of Jesus, he was always, drawing circles around and including the people that the religious and everybody else in society just excluded. And so I can totally get why there's probably so many people out there that may be disoriented in that sense, that in the place that you're feeling, and maybe it's something else, that they've lost a business environment that they thought was supposed to be family and would have their back and take care of them and put them before profits, but they're feeling like, or challenged with the ethics of something. And so I think, man, thank you for sharing it, because I think you may have been just allowed in people to maybe reflect and think on that.
Thanks, Tim. I think there's this interesting saying around, I think, cattle and farming, that if you've got deep wells, you don't need fences.
Mm-hmm.
And
wow.
yeah,
Oof.
I think that
Beautiful.
just saying goodbye to some folks just outside my window.
Bye.
That there's that sense of, what does it mean in a community to have deep wells? Because it feels like a fence moment. We've just experienced a moment where a fence has been put up to maybe publicly kind of let you know who's allowed in and out, sort of thing. Look, that's just how I feel, and that sense of who's in and who's not is devastating to me. Because I feel I've been involved and connected, and as I say, for nearly 40 years, and I still have moments where I don't feel like I'm in. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing I was talking about before, about most of us are like the rest of us. We all need reassuring in life, because I don't know what it is. Human, left to its own devices, the mind is not a great thing at times. We've got to feed it, we've got to nourish it, we've got to put good stuff into it. It's like our bodies, I guess. Otherwise, we have negative thoughts and the like. But yeah, I'm just wanting to be passionate about building refreshing wells that just nourish people. And, it's just, everyone's welcome to come and have a drink if you like. So it's an interesting picture, isn't it? The deep wells versus fences.
Mate, there's a lot I've written down, but if you have deep wells, you don't need fences. Is going to be a constant reminder to me. I mean, as a parent, right? Yes, there's times when you've got little vulnerable children, you need to put up the fence so they don't run out onto the road or get into the pool and drown themselves. But like, if we're raising mature humans, we know there's times we're just going to have to, there's only so much your nanny internet protection thing is going to do for your teenager and stopping them from going to places online that you don't want them to go. There's only so much as a parent that all of your efforts to protect them, and again, these come often, like you said, from well-meaning places. I want to protect, I want to guard. But I think there's a quote I gave to my daughter. We went on a round the world trip to launch Just Travel. We took a couple of teams, one team from Australia and one team from the US to the Middle East, and I was able to take my eldest daughter on a coming of age trip. She's 13, and on different stages I gave her different things to symbolize her coming into this, transitioning into this season of life. And one of them was a quote that said, may the choices you make be reflected of your hopes and not your fears.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of like, hey, do I want to be a protect, fear kind of community builder? Or do I want to be let's be driven by that North Star of hope, of transformation, of beauty, of creativity, expression, inclusivity, of diversity, of wonder, of awe. That is what I think you are doing in your work. Is it's highlighting this, it's drawing people in to reframe their life. The frame you put a picture in is very, very important, and everyone has their script, right? But we frame it within a story, within a narrative, within something. And I think what you are allowing people to see is that with what they have, they can, you've just showing example after example after example of how to reframe our lives with something that is wonderful.
Yeah,
and good.
It is wonderful, it's good. And it's hard to get our heads around that there's goodness to be found in brokenness. Again, I'm just such a bias around story. If we just had time to listen to each other's stories. The thing that I love about what you do in the Uber, you said it before, and not everybody does this, right? You said, I just ask questions. Now, it's as simple as that, right? It's but how often do you meet somebody and they're just like a brick wall and there's nothing coming back at you? That's hard. But the ability just to sit and listen. I see some of the divisive things in our society and communities at the moment, and I just wish that the parties involved at times, and often there's two ends and they really have got the same energy, and there's a whole bunch of people in the middle that if only those two groups could sit down and pour a glass of wine, have a cold beer, make some nice coffee, or do what you're doing, go on a trip together. Imagine if they travelled together. And
well, that's it, man. Take people together to experience these things, and it's like what you're saying. You want to be part of a journey with people, right?
Yeah.
When you're on a journey in community, it is so incredible. Like I grew up in a family that just loves to be. I've boast like really loud and conversationally. It's very intimidating for my wife, who's as sweet and quiet as you could get. And here we are, but I've had to learn to temper my opinions with that curiosity, because it's, when someone says something, and I promise you, people are like crazy people that get in and have wild beliefs. And I've learnt here's a kind of hot tip, and this is, for me, I've learnt when someone says something that's staggering, it would be like, I'd just say, really, that is so interesting. What makes you say that? I'm so curious. And when you kind of amazed with curiosity that's because it's come from somewhere, then suddenly you're not like, well, why? Like the same question can be just said in just a different way, and suddenly you hear their story and you hear where they're coming from, and you realize, why did the ISIS fighter join the army? Well, you know what? He joined ISIS because an American bomb just killed his father. And then he came through and you won. And I'm not justifying any decisions people make, but there's a reason why we think what we think.
Yeah.
We believe what we believe. We do what we do.
Yeah.
And hearing people's stories and letting them share. And it is amazing what you learn and discover, and always, this is the goal, right? It's never to then when can I turn on them with my opinion? It's usually, what do I have to learn from this person and their experience? I am the student every time I get in that car. And I get so many opportunities to give advice, but I never say, hey, look, I'm not going to give you any advice. Can I just remind you of something that you probably already know to be true? People will receive it, because the truth is, I can't give someone advice. I don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes, but I can remind them of something they know to be true about themselves and who they are. And in that moment, there's I think the ability to have these transformational conversations with people.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's leaving ourselves at a level that is accessible, and not getting too puffed up about our own achievements and goals, and realizing that I'm constantly learning stuff from my children, and they're in their 20s.
My gosh,
One
yes.
has just turned 30, and I'm like, the moment I think, and I have to remind them of this, because I'm like, one of them said to me the other day, why did I subscribe to something that they're doing, something that they built online. They're like, you didn't need to do that. You taught me all that stuff. And I'm like, my goodness, the moment you think that I can't learn from you and your experiences and your influences, I
Yes.
want to find out what's going on here. And I love that around parenting. You can either say wow or how when your kids talk to you about things. And there's something about embracing the wow. The how is, it's like there's always a part of it as a parent, but I think we do tend to respond to people's opinions or thoughts or even their dreams sometimes by saying, well, how could you do that? You're not qualified. And yet what you've just shared is that kind of, wow, help me understand what's
Yeah,
going on
help
for
me
you.
understand. I
How
want
did
to
you
know
get to this
more.
place? Because this is so exciting. And yeah, I think we're supposed to be cheerleaders. I think that's the job every human's got, is to strap on the skirt, so to speak, and be a cheerleader.
Yeah, I mean, look, the old Benedictine saying is when the Benedictine monks, when someone would come and knock on the door, and you could imagine this little latch door and this monk peering through. The thing he says to a weary traveler is, "How can I help you on your way?" Not how can I, and I think, we come back to institutions like the church, we come back to a lot of organizations and businesses and things. It's generally like, how can you help this business, or how can you help this thing achieve something? And it's like, no, we exist in community to help each other on the way of hopefully a shared vision. We can agree on a few things, not on exactly what it looks like, but on that it brings beauty and goodness and joy to this world. That pretty much is, I don't know, you probably don't need to add too many more superlatives to describe, like, maybe what we can all, belonging, I would say, where everyone's value is equal and contribution, what they have, their intelligence is uniquely valued and important, and if we can create that space and agree at least on that, gosh.
Absolutely. The wisdom that we hear from older people is really, really amazing, isn't it? And some of the greatest wisdom is, just never stop learning, never think you know everything. And I just, and again, but I lean into my bias around story. I learn about humanity when I take the time to listen to your story. And when you listen to mine, we learn things. And that's what can pull down some of those walls and create some of those wells, is an atmosphere of listening to each other. I'm not suggesting that you got to agree with everybody all the time or anything like that, but it's a bit like life being the code of rugby league, right? Sometimes I think we're too busy with the colour of our jersey and so focused on my team that we forget about the joy of the game, right? And I think life's a bit like that at times. There's so many different opinions and thoughts out there. There's a lot of colours, a lot of people flying different things on different flags, and I get it, and to a degree, I fly stuff on my flag. I fly purpose, belonging, meaning, hope, and you got to have something that you put up the flagpole and stick to in life as well. So I get that. I think there's just really great opportunities, and it's your neighbour, it's your workmate, sometimes it's a relative, but it's a two-way thing as well. I'd also say that if you're in a relationship or a space where you don't feel that person or that community wants to hear your story, maybe that's not the healthiest place for you to be either.
Exactly.
If you just feel that it's, we able to pause for a tick, someone's just walked in.
Absolutely.
Sorry. Yay. I was recording a podcast at night. Yeah. Do you want to pop back? Maybe in an hour? Is that all right? I'll be home by then. I might pop by when we next be here. I'll be here tomorrow. Thanks for that. See you. I don't usually have visitors. We don't have a sign up or anything like that. So there you go. I'm back.
This is great. So just pick up from where you said, you might be in a relationship or, thing where you need to.
Yeah, I think we need to find our tribe as well. I think that's important. And again, you just heard me talk about the colour of the jersey, and it's important also to feel like I belong, that I'm wearing the same colour as you. So I'm not discounting that. I'm just talking about the fact that sometimes that becomes the prevalent thing. The colour of my jersey is more important than humanity, right? Than this thing called humanity and this thing called community. But I think for our own health and our own well-being, it's important to feel like people listen to, hear, and lean into your story in healthy ways and in ways that bring life to you. And I think that's probably part of the journey I'm on at the moment. Is this faith community has always been a part of my life. Is it still? And I'm convinced there is, right? I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, but This is like bread baking in the oven for me at the moment, Tim. So it's really kind of fresh.
Yeah.
Is this sense of people who are navigating and going through journeys related to sexuality and gender are beautiful human beings with incredible gifts, great, amazing stories, and desires and passions that deserve to be listened to, leaned into, and learned from. And we sometimes discount things we don't understand as they're not going to teach me anything. I want to learn, but I long for that sense that even within a faith community that we're all on that journey together. Of let's talk about things, let's have conversations, let's do it quietly over coffee sometimes instead of into a microphone with an auditorium full of people. Just looking after each other well, I think, is sometimes listening and letting other people tell you their story. But again, my encouragement back to all of us is it's important your stories listened to as well.
Yeah,
And
you need to feel like you're seen and you're heard.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, a fundamental. Most people that are hurting and broken don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. And there's nothing worse than when someone doesn't allow you just to dispel the misunderstanding people might have, because each person's story is actually unique. We cannot put blanket assessments on things. And I really want to echo that. I say to my daughter, who has friendship troubles at school, she's in high school now, and I just say, look, if your friends aren't treating you fairly and nicely, just it's okay. You don't have to be mean back. Just find somebody else. And that's really, really hard for someone that's looking for acceptance and wants to feel like, what is it about me? And it's like, you know what? It's not about you. It isn't about you.
Because I'm convinced there'll be someone at your daughter's school who's feeling exactly the same way as she is, right? Because most of us are like the rest of us. And
because most of us are like the rest of us.
So she needs to find that person who's just like her, and a new friendship there'll be a bond there already. And it's one of the most amazing organizations I think that exists on planet Earth there's variations of it, but Alcoholics Anonymous, AA.
Yes.
And the way that
I've been to a few CODA chapters around the place.
Yeah, and it's life-changing, and you'll cry tears of sadness and laugh but it's a story-based environment. It's an environment that helps people stay sober, right? And at the core of it, it's actually from just sharing stories. How powerful is that? There's no one that's bringing there's some mantras and things like that I think are actually beautiful and a big part of it.
Yeah.
But the core of it is the rawness of the room and the ability for everybody just to share their story. And some people are telling the same story they've told each week for 30 years. Some of them are hearing a story for the first time and have been sober for 30 minutes. It's amazing. And at the core of it, again, it's just story. I could rattle on about story all day long. Obviously, I'm passionate about it. It's how I make a living as well. But I'm only doing it because I really as that person who I have this spiritual connection in life, and I'm really impressed by the life of Jesus. And I just love it. When he was on earth, and we're given a pretty clear historical snapshot of that, which I think is very cool. He told a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And do you know he never kind of unpacked the story? This is what I find quite interesting. We're even told that his closest friends were kind of scratching their head going, what was he talking about? And so sometimes I think the mystery as well. So I don't want anyone to hear what I've shared today to think like it's really clear cut, the answers. And there's nothing clear cut about my life. There's nothing clear cut about story. It's messy. It's unconventional. It's contradictory. I'm loving getting into Bono's book at the moment, and it's all about the unresolved stuff of life is his music. But at the end of the day, Jesus was just happy to engage people to get them thinking. He didn't have to hand everything to them on a platter to say, this is how I want you to understand what I just said. And I think sometimes that's the mystery of the stories we share. It's kind of like you can be with someone sharing story and it might hit you the next day, or you might just dwell on it for 24 hours. And that means you've had a rich experience.
Yeah, there's two stories or movies. Actually, it was on Father's Day this year, American Father's Day. I was with my daughter in New York on our way back.
Nice.
And we took my wife's father and mother, so my mother and father-in-law, we took them to a Broadway show. And it was the cheapest show we could find, but it happened to be one of my favorite movies called The Life of Pi. And it was an incredible play. What I loved about it was this idea of what story would you like, the real factual count of events or the fantastical, allegorical account of events, and it kind of basically allows you to really make up for yourself what you're going to do with it, rather than, like you're saying, rather than just giving you like the 5 steps to how to XYZ, the 6 steps. We want that in some, because we search for simplicity, we search for ease, we search for how do I get the shortcut. And the truth and the reality is there is no shortcut. And if there is, if you take it, you will be very unfulfilled to the destination, knowing that you got there through the shortcut. And the other book, and I had the privilege of spending a few days with this person recently, was the guy who wrote The Shack, and we just had
brought him to Australia and toured him, so I know who you're talking about.
You know William Paul Young, and he's become a dear friend through just some time we got to spend up with him in Canada. And his son, actually, him and his son and a group of other people, we were together for a few days. And that story was probably that's another movie that I cried, wept, laughed, all in the same thing. And watched it recently with an Italian homestay that's living with us at the moment. She literally cried, like wept the whole way. She says, "This is torture. I can't watch this film." But again, it's this beautiful, the messiness, the rubble, the absolute anguish and pain of life, but at the same time, the unresolvedness of it. Like, there is no, was this true? Was this not true? It's like, now you fill in the blanks, you know?
Oh, look, that's so, in so many levels, that story was not only, I mean, I think the book The Shack was banned from Christian bookstores in America. Right?
I know. I remember like having to secretly hide that I was reading it around certain people, or else they'd think I was some kind of apostate or something.
I mean, what's ironic is it didn't need to be to become a New York Times bestseller, and then turned into a movie. But how messy a presentation that God is one day a black woman and the next day a white man. But how beautiful to consider that the day God became the white man was the day that he needed a father figure to go and collect the body of his daughter, right, in the movie. I mean,
oh my God,
it is profound story writing. And I don't, but the problem is, again, we get so tied up with things like theology and my perception of what God even looks like, where we miss the point that the story's talking to us about the comfort and embrace of a mother and the strength and support of a father. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that is pretty deep and powerful stuff.
Yeah. What
if you
is the moral to the
Shack,
story?
you have no idea what I'm talking about, right? But
right. Oh, totally go and see it. I highly recommend it. And again, it's like, you know, yeah. Sorry, go.
I've spent probably equivalent of maybe 3 weeks on the road with Paul in different parts of the world, and he lives a life of loving people. He would wear a thick flannel jacket to every one of the events we did. And one day I just said to him, and it was a dark jacket, I said, "Do you mind if I ask you wear the same jacket?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "It's people at that when they're lining up talking to me, I hold them and they weep on my shoulder quite often, and my jacket absorbs their tears and it doesn't stain, so it doesn't show it doesn't embarrass them." Now, that's who the guy is, right here. And typically there is a lot of emotion around what he does. But then you hang out with the real person, and his story, his personal story, is one of brokenness.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And one of mess, but it's also one of incredible miracles at times, delight and joy. A great example, another guy I've hung with that had a similar effect is Brian Welsh from the band Korn, and his story of addiction and raising a daughter on his own and a life of faith and becoming a bit of a religious zealot. And this is just, at the time of my life touring him around Australia, 3/4 of the audience were all Korn fans, covered in tattoos and pierced, and probably a bit like those people you were saying when you pick them up in Uber.
Yeah.
And they're at the core of, these are some of the most beautiful, gentle people I've ever met in my life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, Rod, it is... it's a joy to be able to talk about these things, talk about not only people and stories that seem stories from history, like, you know, William Wallace and Jesus the Christ, or, you know, but also these present day people that are we get to make that write stories and celebrate, not because of their, you know, how smart they are, but because of how they dealt with immense brokenness and pain. And like you said, it's that saying is like, most of us are like the rest of us. And I think if people can go away listening to this conversation today, realizing feeling encouraged, really feeling that, you know, that whatever they're going through, whatever challenges they're faced with, that there is a way that every story can be framed with such beauty and such hope. And and the future is bright. Whether you've got 85 years old and you might have a few years left, you have no idea the impact that you can have in being a wise guide and sharing your life and sharing your stories with the community and people around you. Whether you've just in high school and you don't know what's up from down and left from right, there's an adventure of a roller coaster you get to ride, and I promise you it's going to be high and low. But there's a community of people, if you look for them, that will help you on your way. And you're doing that through film. You're doing that through, I know, the way you lead your team and your staff that work with you. And every time I get to chat with you like this, I always go away feeling pretty good about myself. And I feel like I've met a kindred spirit. So thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing and being vulnerable with people today. Is there anything you'd really want to share as we kind of close up to encourage people today? Anything that's happening in the world of movies change people that they can be part of right here and right now? Please kind of share some of your final thoughts with us today.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for allowing the conversation. This is like fresh bread in the oven for me, this current sort of even situation, if you like. And so I feel like I've had a therapeutic conversation. And, I don't want anyone to be under any misconceived ideas. The people who I've had to, and my wife and I, navigate with are dear, close friends. And in the midst of this painful moment, we're sitting in rooms together and we're ruminating over the moment and the crash that's taken place. And that's healthy. And I think, it's just sometimes I think the avoidance of conflict is we're missing out on stuff when we avoid conflict too much, particularly on important things in life. And anyway, you didn't ask me to say that, but
that's really good though. Yeah. I mean, that's the places that we feel most uncomfortable and feel lost, right? We don't feel like we have bearings when we go into those rooms of, I'm going to have to say something. I don't know how it's going to be received, but I have to speak my truth and I have to be honest. I have to be real.
Yeah.
And that is huge. Thank you for even bringing that up. I think it's a real important thing.
Yeah. I think in regards to our work, another fresh moment for us is we're knee deep. Actually, it's over our heads, I reckon. Working on a project called Sound of Freedom. It's an incredible movie. It's still out in cinemas, but it very soon will be digital DVD. You'll be able to watch it anywhere. And I just encourage people. It's a personal passion, and I think it's something that is probably a passion for you as well, in terms of what does it mean? What's social justice in our world? And this film highlights the fact that children are still being abducted and trafficked at alarming rates. And so the movie just, I think it's going to mash your heart into a million pieces when you watch it, but it also, before you finish watching it, it's going to restore you those pieces. This has been what I've heard. This is what I felt, and this is what I've heard from women. And I tell you, the hardest audience with some of these movies is women, right? Mothers and people. And they're all saying it. That's the feedback I'm seeing. There's a mosaic of your crushed heart that gets built back together to look at the world through a different lens, to take some action, to do what you can do. And I would encourage people around it. It's not every day we work on a project like this. It's an incredibly well-made movie, very, very high quality. And that's part of the depth of experience, engagement that you'll have with it. But at the same time, I'm a big fan of putting our heart out on the table and letting story around social justice massage, so that when we put it back in, it's not the same, because I still want comfort for me. I still want all the Western benefits, right? I do, Rod Hopping does, right? And if I don't lean into this stuff, I get selfish and lazy, and I just don't care about others. And I want to care about others. I'm probably only here doing what I am doing because others have cared for me in life and over time as well. So at a broad level, if you can engage with social justice, and your flavour might be different to mine. Like, I'm particularly leaning into this area around trafficking. My wife and I are involved in a work in Nepal. We've got hands and feet in that space, so we're quite invested in it. But yours might be, there's so many different ways to engage with this, but something happens when we do something to help others.
Absolutely. Look, this is, and we could have spent a lot more time talking about maybe that film, and look, when it comes to the work I do with refugees, the number one vulnerable people in the world to being recruited and trafficked are those that are displaced, right? And I think for me, what that does is it helps us to realize we all have a role. If we see in our community people that don't belong, the minute they are excluded from community is the minute that they will be seconded into some other community, whether it be gangs, whether it be someone that pretends to show them some form of community that will be abusive and using them. But when people are, so whether it's your neighbors in your street, whether it's, your kids' friends who you don't really like who they're hanging out, whatever it might be, when you're able to show unconditional acceptance and love and belongingness and community. And for me, it extends primarily to those people who have lost everything for no fault of their own.
Yeah.
And when we can offer that, it doesn't have to be received, but if we can offer that and present it and always let people know, I think we can go a long way into addressing even sometimes how can you address a child in some Southeast Asian country being trafficked, but we can do something here and now, the way we live our lives. And if there's a dissonance between the way we daily live our lives and maybe what we see and do, then I think we can bridge that with just everyday things. So with that can be anything that you do that you're passionate about. Showing love and genuine concern and care for people around us is such a gift we all can offer. And so love what you do, love the work. Let's anyone who's out there just chuck in Movies Change People, to follow them, and you'll be inspired along the way and many different paths you might take as you journey on with them. So thanks for what you do, Rod. You're a gift. You're a friend, and you are, I know, a great dad, a husband, boss, all of those things that really matter too. So I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, Tim. It's been nice to connect and just be encouraged by your journey as well, and the hustle of all that you're involved in doing, because again, I think I know this to be true because you care and you want to make a difference in the world. So thanks for this opportunity to chat. I've really loved it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Just Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you found it valuable, why not share it or leave a review and drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube? Every little bit helps get these conversations out there. And you can always reach out to me at timothybuxton.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I'll see you next time for another courageous conversation.